Hi, my name is Alex Petrick, and I work with the Rural Ontario Institute, or ROI, as a rural data analyst. Today, I'll talk about a resource ROI has that connects rural leaders and researchers to relevant data for rural Canada. This will focus mostly on the Ontario context, but the content will be relevant for rural areas across Canada as well. ROI's mission is to develop rural leaders and also to facilitate collaboration on issues that are facing rural and Northern Ontario today. One way that it does this is by analyzing data at a level that individual towns and townships may not be able to do on their own. Data is useful for planning and development because it provides evidence to guide decisions in a way that tries to be objective and free of personal bias. And having a solid understanding of data that are available and what the data show us can benefit rural areas that are trying to plan their futures. To this end, ROI developed the FactFinder's Guide to Local and Regional Data. FactFinder's Guide lists major data sources that can help rural-focused researchers and organizations, and it includes links to make the data easy to access. We hope that this creates a resource that will help everyone from municipal staff to student researchers to locate data that supports their work. We recently updated this guide that was originally published in 2017. And so in this video, I'll talk a bit about the data that you can find in the guide and other things that you may want to know when working with rural data. One challenge that we quickly encounter has to do with what I just said, rural data. Most people have slightly different ideas of what rural really means, and there isn't a universal definition for what makes a place rural. Instead, we have a few terms that are useful, including census metropolitan areas, census agglomerations, and rural and small town areas. These are terms that Statistics Canada uses to classify different places in Ontario. Within Ontario, census metropolitan areas, or CMAs, are municipalities that have a core population of at least 100,000 people, and they also include nearby areas where many people commute into that larger core. So for instance, in the London CMA that's on screen here, the City of London is part of the CMA, which is in red, but the CMA also includes local towns and townships that are in Middlesex County to the north and west and east of London, and also towns and townships in Elgin County to the south. So the full CMA is in gray, and that obviously includes areas that are beyond just the scope of the City of London. Similarly, census agglomerations, or CAs, are similar to census metropolitan areas, but they have a core population of at least 10,000, but under 100,000. And they'll also include areas that may commute into that core as well. Rural and small town areas, or RST areas, refer to essentially whatever is left over after we identify CMAs and CAs. So when ROI talks about rural areas, we sometimes look at rural and small town areas, but sometimes we group those together with census agglomerations and consider them as part of non-metro Ontario. And this really depends on what we're looking at. Some topics are better studied with a regional approach, and some are better looked at through the lens of a town or a township. So when we look at hospitals, for instance, we may need to consider how rural areas interact with nearby service centers that may not fit exactly into the rural and small town definition. This may seem quite technical, but understanding these differences can help you to better understand the data that you're working with, and it can also help you to better understand information that you hear from other sources. It's important to ask what we're really talking about when we talk about rural areas. So what's inside the FactFinder's Guide? Most of the data that's included comes from Statistics Canada, which publishes a large amount of data that is relevant to rural communities. The guide has grouped data into different categories in terms of data that's updated every 5 years, every year, and every month. The 5-year data mainly comes from countrywide censuses, like the Census of Population, the Census of Agriculture, and the Aboriginal Peoples Survey. These collect a large amount of data over a wide area. So they can provide a good picture of things like town populations, the languages spoken, crop information, and much more. The profiles from the Census of Population are a great source for many social statistics in your local town or county. However, they're only updated every 5 years, So you may find data that is a few years old and may not be quite as recent as you would like it to be, depending on what you're looking to know. However, there's also plenty of data that's updated annually, and these include things like population estimates between censuses each year, and results from tools like the Canadian Community Health Survey. Data in this category may only be available for certain geographies, like for a province or for an economic region, but in some cases, they may not be available at the level of your local town or community. And sometimes they can vary by year. So in the case of the General Social Survey, that tool focuses on a particular theme every year, but that theme changes from year to year. So if you're interested in how populations change over time or how Ontarians interact with each other more generally, there might be some annual data sources that could be useful for your work. As well, there's also monthly data, and that includes things like the labor force survey and the building permits survey. Similar to annual data, these can encounter issues in terms of the granularity of the data. So they may only show a broad section of the country and they may not focus in on a specific place. However, they could be useful for things like economic analysis within a county or tracking the development of housing across the province. It really depends on what it is that you're looking for. As I mentioned before, most of the data comes from Statistics Canada that is listed in the Fact-Finders Guide, but it does include sources from other data from other sources as well. While we did our best to be thorough, Stats Canada publishes new data on a regular basis. You can search through the data for yourself by going to statcan.gc.ca or by doing a Google search for Statistics Canada, which will bring you to the homepage. And once you do that, you can click on, well, first select your language, and then on the top left, you'll see a tab for data. Within that tab, there's a portal that will show you plenty of different tables that you can search through. So first, there's a search function where you can do a keyword search. There's also a list of subjects that you can filter through. And these may be helpful in terms of finding the exact term that you might be looking for. So for instance, if you're interested in workforce data, it may help to know that they are listed under labor and not under a label like workforce. By scrolling further down, you'll also be able to filter through different geographies. So you can search for things at the national level, the provincial level, the sub-provincial level, and so on. And there's also an option to filter by the frequency with which a data table is updated. And you can also look for specific survey instruments or tools. So if you were interested in looking at things from the census, you could select it from this list as well. You can also layer these different filters on top of each other. So if you're looking for annual data that is related to economics and focus at the national level, you could click on those three options and get results filtered according to what you need. Finally, if you're really interested in agricultural data, there's also another source that you may want to know about, which is the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs special tabulations for county profiles. These come from the agricultural census, and they have data related to farm sizes, crops that are being grown, farmer ages, and much more. They cover every county in Ontario and the municipalities within them. And they're also tabulated for special regions like Northern Ontario or for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which is around Lake Ontario. You can find these on OMAFRA's website, or you can just do a search for the county profiles at OMAFRA through Google. Just to show you where they are on the website, after selecting your language, on the left-hand side, if you scroll down a bit, under resources, there's an option for statistics. And then at the bottom, you can find the county profiles link. Within this list, you can click on any county or any region that you're interested in, and it'll allow you to download an Excel file that contains all the data. I hope that this video has given you a good overview of some of the data sources that are available for rural research. If you're interested in learning more about rural data, be sure to check out the updated Fact-Finders Guide for more details. And if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to the Rural Ontario Institute. You can email us at info@ruralontarioinstitute.ca. If we can't answer your question, we probably know someone who can. Thanks for watching.